Syria looks to carve a new future after the sudden end to 24 years of rule under President Bashar al-Assad.
Relief mixed with caution as world leaders react to the downfall of Syria's President Bashar al-Assad.
This is what the streets of Damascus looked like on Sunday. No movement, no business, lifeless almost. The calm after the storm. That's because Syria's rebel forces imposed a curfew on the capital on the first day since overthrowing the country's longtime president Bashar al-Assad. The curfew is 13 hours long, starting from 4 p.m. local time through to 5 a.m. on Monday. It's a stark difference from the scenes of cheering and celebration that erupted after news broke of the end of Assad's reign. And Syrians, taking in a new reality, one that brought a sense of calmness to the streets of Damascus and an end to the fighting, were happy to oblige. They're hoping this newly found peace can last, and the leadership of the rebel coalition which overthrew Assad is echoing the same sentiment.
أن تبقى المظاهر المسلحة بهذا الشكل في الطرقات وضرب الرصاص وما إلى ذلك.
It's a new beginning for the country that's been under President Bashar al-Assad's rule for 24 years, and emotions are continuing to run high.
حلم إلا شوي، حلم إلا شوي، بده حدا ينقذه من الحلم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. والله فرحة لا توصف، فرحة لا توصف بالشعب، الحمد لله محبة بتقول ناطريننا من زمان يعني الحمد لله الشعب حتى نحررهم من رجس هالنظام هذا الحمد لله.
Abu Muhammad al-Gulani, leader of the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham militant group, has appointed ex-Prime Minister Mohammad Ghazi al-Jalali to oversee the transitional government. Al-Jalali served as Prime Minister under Assad and is tasked with ensuring state institutions and social services run uninterrupted until a permanent political solution is reached.
The fall of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's government in the early hours of Sunday morning brought his 24 years in power to a dramatic end. In a lightning offensive, rebel groups spearheaded by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham took city after city as they made their way south from Aleppo towards the capital Damascus. World leaders and international figures have responded with a mixture of relief but also caution. In a television address, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said Assad has tens of thousands of lives on his conscience and blamed him for creating the mass exodus of refugees from Syria.
Es kommt jetzt darauf an, dass Syrien schnell in Recht und Ordnung leben kann und dass Recht und Ordnung dort hergestellt werden. Dabei müssen alle Religionsgemeinschaften, alle Volksgruppen und Minderheiten Schutz genießen. Allen Syrerinnen und Syrern muss ein Leben in Würde und Selbstbestimmung möglich gemacht werden. Daran werden wir die nächste syrische Regierung messen.
EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas said the fall of the Assad regime was a positive and long-awaited development. It also shows the weakness of Assad's backers, Russia and Iran. Our priority is to ensure security in the region. I will work with all the constructive partners in Syria and in the region, she said in a statement posted on X. And speaking at the White House, US President Joe Biden said at long last the Assad regime has fallen, calling its downfall a fundamental act of justice.
The upshot for all this is, for the first time ever, neither Russia nor Iran nor Hezbollah could defend this abhorrent regime in Syria. And this is a direct result of the blows that Ukraine, Israel have delivered upon their own self-defense with unflagging support of the United States.
In a written statement, the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres welcomed the end of Syria's dictatorial regime and urged the country to rebuild. After 14 years of brutal war and the fall of the dictatorial regime, today the people of Syria can seize a historic opportunity to build a stable and peaceful future, he said. The international messages of relief for the promise of a new future for Syria have been tempered by caution that the country could descend into further chaos. With Syria at a crossroads, what happens next is almost impossible to predict. Syria has been devastated by a bloody civil war since 2011, which has its roots in a failed uprising against Bashar al-Assad during the Arab Spring. While many of the region's rulers either stepped down or were forcibly removed, Assad hung on. He directed the military to launch a brutal crackdown on the unrest, with an estimated 3,500 protesters killed. After months of violence, armed rebel groups began forming across the country, and what started as an insurgency had, by 2012, escalated into full-blown civil war. The UN Refugee Agency says that more than 14 million Syrians have been forced to flee their homes. More than 7 million of those remain internally displaced. The rest have fled abroad. While many settled in the countries closest to Syria, others sought asylum in Europe, and the news of Assad's downfall has been met with a mixture of disbelief and joy.
On n'arrive pas même à croire, parce que c'était un rêve, vraiment un rêve qu'on attendait depuis très longtemps. 60 ans de la humiliation, de dictature, là on est libre, on n'arrive pas à croire. Et même parfois j'arrive pas, j'ai peur de dormir pour se lever, c'est un rêve.
C'est notre pays, c'est notre territoire, c'est là où on a vécu, c'est là où on a grandi, c'est là où on veut vraiment vivre notre vie tranquillement sans avoir aucun problème.
Ça fait 14 ans qu'on attend la liberté, qu'on demande la liberté et maintenant c'est enfin on l'a obtenu et on est très content d'être ici. En fait, nous on veut que la paix.
Es ist eine Revelation, es ist kein Bürgerkrieg in Syrien. Bitte, die Medien in Österreich sagen, das ist ein Bürgerkrieg in Syrien. Es ist kein Bürgerkrieg, es ist Revelation und jetzt ist endlich fertig. Assad-regime is fertig, is voorbij.
Super blij, echt. En super trots ook. Dus ja.
Waar ben je zo trots op?
Dat eindelijk Syrië is vrij.
We zijn allemaal optimistisch. We zijn allemaal Syriër en we gaan samen Syrië opbouwen.
Natürlich, wir werden nicht vergessen, dass Deutschland uns geholfen hat, viel gegeben. Ich selber, ich habe studiert Medizintechnik, mein Studium abgeschlossen. Ich habe die Staatsbürgerschaft und ich werde auch nach Syrien zurückkehren, um mein Land wieder aufzubauen.
Journalists have joined the protest in Georgia to denounce what they call an increase in violence against the media during the coverage of ongoing mass rallies in the country. Several hundred media workers on Sunday marched down Tbilisi's central Rustaveli Avenue, holding posters and pictures of their colleagues they say had been assaulted. The demonstration comes as tens of thousands of Georgians continue their protest against the ruling party.
It is the 11th day of protests in Georgia. Over the weekend, the unknown masked thugs attacked a journalist and a cameraman during a live broadcast. The following day, the journalists protested the attacks on more than 50 journalists who were severely injured while performing their journalistic duties. The media representatives marched to the Parliament building of Georgia, where the Christmas tree had been placed earlier that morning. The journalists attached the protest posters and the photos of the injured journalists to the Christmas tree, transforming it to the protest tree.
Romania's far-right presidential candidate, Călin Georgescu, stood outside a closed polling station on Sunday in protest of the second round of the country's presidential election being cancelled. The country's top court made an unprecedented decision to annul the first round of the vote, following intelligence alleging Russian interference on social media to promote the so-called TikTok Messiah.
Acest vot a fost anulat și practic anulând democrația ni se anulează însăși libertatea noastră.
George Simeon, leader of the far-right Alliance for the Unity of Romanians, echoed Georgescu in denouncing the election's cancellation. After topping the polls in the first round, Georgescu was set to face the Liberal candidate Elena Lasconi on Sunday. New dates will be set to rerun the presidential vote from scratch.
South Korea's opposition leader said on Sunday that his party will push for a second vote on a motion to impeach President Yoon Suk-yeol. If approved, the second impeachment motion will take place on December 14th. Yoon avoided the first opposition-led bid to impeach him because most ruling party members boycotted the vote on Saturday to prevent the two-thirds majority needed to suspend his presidential powers. If impeached, the country's constitutional court then may decide to remove him from office, which after he will be prosecuted for sending heavily armed soldiers into Seoul streets with declaration of martial law, a move that shocked the world. Meanwhile, the vote's defeat is likely to fuel nationwide protests and further escalate political turmoil.
Paris's iconic Notre-Dame Cathedral has risen from the ashes. The UNESCO World Heritage Site was closed to visitors and worshippers for 5 years to undergo intense restoration work after a fire broke out in 2019. The restoration timeline was hailed as a remarkable achievement for a structure that took nearly 2 centuries to build. The event was organized by French President Emmanuel Macron, who championed the restoration efforts. Some 1,500 dignitaries, including U.S. President-elect Donald Trump, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, U.S. First Lady Jill Biden, and Prince William of Britain's royal family attended the historic event. Macron expressed his gratitude to the courageous firefighters and first responders who braved the flames and saved the cathedral from total destruction. The French president also thanked the more than 2,000 personnel who worked tirelessly to restore the medieval structure back to its former glory.